10 years ago, I was visiting my local Barnes and Noble bookstore in Westchester, Ohio. That's near Cincinnati, and heard someone talking in the next row of books about science fiction fantasy. So I walked around the corner and said, kind of cheekily, someone say science fiction fantasy? Standing there was the store manager and a rather tall, impressive man, kind of giving me an eagle eyed stare, if you know what I mean. That man said to me, "Hi, I'm Larry Correa," and shook my hand. To which I replied, "Hey, I've read all your books." Uh, and he was surprised by that, but that's another story. In case you don't know him, Larry Correa is a best selling author of urban fantasy, werewolves, vampires. And then we talked about, and he's moved on a little bit from there. And then we talked for 20 minutes or so as he walked around the bookstore signing his own books with permission, of course. Finally, after my whole life, I had an opportunity to ask a bunch of serious questions, which I'd wondered about, but didn't trust the answers from Google and Google searches. Here was someone who knew from experience. I learned a lot from Larry Correa in those few minutes, which I'll tell you about some of the time in the future, but not right now. Right now, I'll tell you one thing. He told me that I told him that I wanted to write. And his response was, "Everyone has a good idea for a book. What you want is a great idea." I'm leaving out a lot of context here, but my point is that about a month later, I had a great idea for a book. Unfortunately, it was nonfiction. And the last decade has been spent writing that book for the first year or so, and then turning it into a successful business. I self-published. And so that work, I retained the copyright to it because I didn't go through a publishing house. That's a whole other side of things here. Yet I always had the dream of being a science fiction fantasy literature author. And now's the time to pursue being one. Uh, that my first question is science fiction or fantasy literature? It's important to know what kind of world you're looking to build. I've decided on science fiction. Why? Well, you see those 8 college degrees on the wall over there? Those are 2 bachelor's and master's in physics, a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in aerospace engineering and engineering, in all of them in engineering, 3 of them in engineering, and then I got a math degree, and et cetera, and et cetera. Adding to it that I don't know how to ride a horse. Yes, I could learn, but start somewhere. And the general thought was that I should write what I know, which is science fiction. I doubt few of the other questions will be as easy as answering this one. And I'll have to remember that fantasy is deep inside of me, deep within me, and may try to find a way into my science fiction novels. It's sneaky that way, but I'll be on guard. So, science fiction. I'm still working on setting things up, outside of the whole writing part. The setting up a YouTube channel. This is my first live stream on this YouTube channel. It is my 217th, 216th, I think, live stream all told. But for this channel, it is my first live stream. But they're setting up the YouTube channel, a new YouTube channel, Facebook profile, email list, website, and podcast. What? What science fiction writer has all of those? Well, I know how to do them because of the nonfiction book that I wrote, and so I will. Next question. Oh, and here's my website for you to look at. This is the YouTube channel. Let me make myself small. This is the YouTube channel. Explore the universe. You'll love what you find. That's my current value proposition. And an aspiring sci-fi author's journey with live streams 10 p.m. on Saturdays Eastern Time. This is my website, jhirampiesel.com. And you can aspire to my email list, which doesn't have much yet. And I haven't written any articles up here. This would be the first one with its video and podcast episode later. And we'll talk about the podcast episode. You have to actually put out an episode before the podcast that you've show that you've created actually shows up anywhere. None can show up with 0 episodes. Sorry, I'm going to be getting technical. Occupational hazard, and I'm using it to become a science fiction author. So J. Hiram Piesel, that is a pen name. It is unique enough that I was able to get it as a URL. And you can find my website at jhirampeacel.com. And in case you're wondering, I'm using a pen name for the simple reason that I don't want to confuse my 45,000 subscribers on YouTube for my other channel. 500 and right at the moment it's 533 new subscribers per month. I've done better, but I've certainly done worse. So it's a nice steady pace. I've been doing it about 8 years because I wrote the book and it took a couple of years. Anyway, not to talk about that. I had I want to sort of keep things. I don't want to confuse my 45,000 subscribers. I don't want to confuse my 32,000 members on my 58 Facebook groups. And I don't want to eventually confuse people who buy my books on Amazon with the name of a nonfiction book at the same time. So yes, a pen name. And no, it's not much of a secret. I realize that. It's an organizational tool. J. Hiram Piesel is actually my first initial, John, Jon, my actual middle name, Hiram, and my last name translated to English. So, okay, world building. Mostly I'm perusing my thoughts about world building. As Larry Correia pointed out to me, I really do hope to get him on my podcast someday so you can hear for yourself. Sci-fi fantasy writers have this thing they love to do. Understand these are my words, not his. These aspiring authors love to craft their novel over a decade, and then they have a beautiful book with a seriously great storyline. After 10 years, it had better be, and so they get it published as the first book in a trilogy. And the next year, the publisher says, "Where's the second book?" And the author realizes they didn't put everything into the first book. All the stuff they'd been working on, all but didn't make it into the first book. So they cobbled together everything else that they've had, and it's sort of an okay read. And that second book is published. And then a year later, the publisher says, "Okay, where's the third book as part of your contractual obligations?" And so a terrible third book is written with all new material the author hasn't spent a decade polishing. And that's it for the author for a decade. All this is archetypal, as it were. It's a story with perhaps some truth to it. And it's not something I want to do. Well, okay, I'd love to spend a decade writing a book equivalent to Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, except I've got better things to do. Shocking? Yes, I think so. I'm shocked that I would feel this way. That my 17-year-old, 15-year-old me is like, what? No. What happened to you? What I want to do is write a fun, rousing story that's well liked and well read too, often and repeatedly, which you'll hear about once it's published. But let's talk basics of world building. What kind of world would fit my criteria of fun, rousing, well-liked, and well-read? Will it be in a galaxy far, far away like Star Wars, or long ago like Battlestar Galactica, or near future like all the Star Treks, I know myself well enough that I'm something that I'll come up with something unique. I've read so much science fiction and fantasy literature for so many years, but I believe new ideas are still possible. So let's go back to my criteria: fun, rousing, and well liked. And well read will take care of itself if I do those first three. Well, well liked probably means not too strange. Well, strange is okay. What's the word I'm looking for? Well liked. That's it. So why not set it on Earth, maybe a few years into the future? Not a century, but just a few years so I can avoid current events. And you publish a book, it takes a year to publish sometimes, and world events take place, and it's like, wow, your book is really out of sync. Okay, so set it a few years in the future. I know my life expectancy plus 5 or 10 years. Perfect. So now, see how we're moving forward here. What else? Well, what's space like? What's space travel like? Yeah, that's a big one, because a science fiction book needs an element of science fiction. I know there's all kinds of science fiction books, military, space opera, many different things, and I am thinking about those styles. But really, what's better than space? I like something bigger than just our solar system too. It's really a question of how big, right? Too big, and everything becomes difficult to get around, more or less. I've still got a lot of things to think about, including how much I want to say to you about book ideas before publishing. Well, very little until I publish, but I'd like to talk around it if it makes sense. The questions, not the answers, the possibilities, not the certainties. Something I'd like to do is start interviewing other authors. Wouldn't that be great? We could talk about what they've published, including recently. I'm not looking to get any ideas from them. I'm looking to, see how they think about getting ideas. Is that too subtle? I'm going to point to the college degrees again about, I may get in deep here, but then I figure if anybody can take it, it would be a science fiction fan like you. We could talk about what they've published, including recently. I think a lot of new authors would love to have some publicity. But this is like my old computer class talking about bootstrapping a computer. How do you start a computer when you need a computer to start the computer? How do you partially turn it on? Just enough for it to start turning itself on. And that's what happens when you start an author's platform, which I'm doing right now. How am I doing so far? This live stream is also an opportunity for you to ask questions. I'll start off with a topic inspired by your questions from past live streams, or comments, questions, conversations with you. Email me, call me on the phone. If you have a question, ask during these live streams. I'm hoping, unless I have some travel concerns, and maybe even then, I hope to have this weekly. And I have, I'm approaching, well, let's say I already told you, 215 on my other YouTube channel. And I also, earlier today, I started my another business about how to do all this, how authors can go about doing all this. But this is my science fiction platform. And I'll talk about my books that I'm working, that I'll be publishing, after they're published, and I'll be talking to other authors and all kinds of fun, merry stuff. So please be sure to like this live stream to help draw in more science fiction fans. The more, the merrier. Okay, that's it. I'll see you next Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern, or the Pacific time, or in the Pacific time zone, 7 p.m. Bye. And it's great to meet you.